Hi, everyone. I am Lorianne. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I am with.
I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to our How We See It podcast.
So we're really happy today to have Mel Robertson with us. She is the De-Clutter Expert and coach. And I believe that these days we're going to be needing a lot of that. So thank you for being with us, Mel. Want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh, I'd be happy to, Lorianne and Roy. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here on your show. I am a declutter expert and coach, and really as someone who was cluttered, miserable, and depressed and suicidal growing up, I actually realized that the outside is just a mirror of the inside. And so I created a step-by-step process to help people get free from clutter without feeling overwhelmed and to keep it from coming back.
Wow. So what pushed you into this? What made you decide to make this your profession?
So the short story is I actually got to a point in my life where I was playing with law of attraction and received a $50,000 check in the mail, which allowed me to take some time off and figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And at that point in my life, I could create order out of chaos, and I loved it. And I had this background in energy healing, but I couldn't see myself sitting in an office doing sessions with people all day long. And while I was on that time off, I saw the show Hoarders for the very first time. And I don't know if you've ever seen that show.
Yep.
But with someone with an energy healing background, it's absolutely horrifying, because what people don't really understand is all of that clutter that has accumulated is that person's Great Wall of China. That is their defense system. That is their protection. That's how they keep you out. They keep themselves safe. And the show comes in and rips it all away in a short period of time and films their episode. Meanwhile, they're leaving the person completely exposed and re-traumatizing them. So it made me want to create a company that helped people get to the root of the clutter so that it didn't get that way in the first place, but also be able to experience happiness and abundance in every area of their lives. Because the truth of the matter is, we're all born with the same birthright to be happy and abundant in every area of our lives. And quite frankly, clutter is anything that gets in the way of that, whether it shows up as physical clutter in the external world, or it's the mental and emotional clutter that keeps us stuck. And so that's the short story. And it was once I started my business that I actually became aware of my own cluttered beginnings.
Well, so this is personal, but were you in a cluttered environment in your house?
My house outside of my room was not cluttered. But my room, I was a total cluttered, messy kid. You could not see the floor. I mean, there were two paths, one from the door to my bed and one from the door to my desk, but I was the only one who saw those paths there. And I also really struggled with not just attachments to things like office supplies, books, music, containers, like those are my favorite things. But I suffered severe attachments to people because I had a lot of abandonment and loss in my life. My mother abandoned me over and over again. I lost my brother to suicide when I was 15 years old. And so I had all of that attachment and clinging that goes along with it all. So my mother's part of the house was great, but don't go in my room.
That's
How about my
interesting that you're
youngest
saying.
son?
Sorry. I was going to say, that's interesting that you're saying holding on to something when you've had abandonment, because some people, they'll even do that with pets. They'll collect pets because they know that they're loyal and they'll be there. And now I have pets, but I'm not an extremist, but I've seen stories of people who have extreme, like, 68 cats or 95 cats in a little one-bedroom apartment. I would imagine that that is part of cluttering too, because it's the same psychological need for attachment.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it really comes down to is that we can only be in three states. We're either avoiding and pushing away what's uncomfortable, that's the resisting and not paying attention to anything that's been accumulating, or we're clinging and attaching to what feels good, what makes us feel good, what we don't want to lose, and all of that, or we can simply allow what is to be.
Okay. So my question was going to be, I think this is probably going to be common. How many people keep clothes because they think they're going to lose weight and fit back into them?
Oh, tons of people. That's the goal clothes. We call them the goal clothes, and it's it's hanging on to stuff. It's just hanging on to the past. Like, it's also this, it's coming from this place of lack and not trusting that the universe is abundant, because when you do lose the weight, if you let go of the stuff you've been hanging on to, the universe will bring you the finances to buy a whole new wardrobe. You don't have to hang on to the past. You need to learn to let go to make the space for the magic to happen, because as you accumulate things, it just blocks the whole flow of abundance from your life. And, you know, science has already proven that everything is energy. And so, and everything's created with a purpose. Like, clothes are meant to be worn, books are meant to be read, notebooks are meant to be written in, everything is meant to be used. And so if you have all this stuff that you're not wearing and you're not using, and you shove it in a closet or you shove it in drawers, it's basically stifled purpose. You're like denying its purpose and denying somebody else from enjoying it when you could let it go and somebody else could actually be wearing it. I had one of my first clients had, we'd say, a fetish with elephants. Like, that was her thing. And she had elephant everything. And I helped her shift her perspective, because it was so hard for her to let go of any elephants. But I got her to get used to the idea that if you just let it go and you just donate it, that the universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it, will make sure it gets to the right person. Your only job is to let go. And once you can let go, you start to make space for the magic to happen. But you have to let the stuff go. You can't hang on to it. I mean, I almost wish we were back in the day where we didn't settle down, because you wouldn't want to carry all this shit with you everywhere you went, right? I mean, it's a pain in the butt. Who wants to lug it all around? You know, I wouldn't want to move with all of that, but yet there's tons of people that actually move the stuff from house to house to house and pay to move it over and over again, when you could just get rid of it and save the money and have the money to buy it again new if you were ever really going to use it.
Yeah, I found when I went from, like I said, from 2,400 square feet, that doesn't even count the garage that I had, which was quite large. So it's not just 24 square feet and the basement. And I literally moved into 600 square foot apartment from there. And basically I had the Salvation Army take everything. And it was not easy, because there are things you get attached to, but in the end, there's not a lot that you miss. And that freedom, like you said, to say, you know what, now I can pack up and go anywhere I want. I don't have a lot there to worry about. And there's a freedom that's attached to letting go.
Yeah,
Well,
100%.
I think a lot of people, they just, I know someone that has like letters and cards they've had since they were a little girl.
Oh, stop
You know,
it.
and I mean, I'm not mentioning any names. I'm just saying I know someone like that. So, you know, there's a lot of emotional attachment to that type of stuff. Is that some of the hardest stuff for people to get rid of?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always tell my clients, like, don't start with the hard stuff first, because letting go is actually a muscle that you have to build. You don't go from being someone who's attached and hanging on to someone who's just going to like, oh, let go. It's like you're clinging like this, and, you know, you force a little pinky up, and then you force the next finger up, and you let go little by little. So you start with the easy stuff. You start with baby steps, like 1 square foot at a time on something that's easy. Don't tackle something that's hard for you to make decisions about. And as you let go, you start to build that muscle, so that when you go through it the next time, you let go of even more. And then the things that were hard get a little bit easier. And it's something that happens gradually over time. Like, you didn't accumulate the stuff overnight. So don't expect to be able to let go of it all overnight, especially the hard stuff, especially the sentimental stuff. But be willing to bring your presence to it and actually look at it. And when you start doing that and you start practicing the muscle of letting go of the stuff that's easy, then that stuff will get easier. And one day you'll actually let it go. Like, I have this example. I didn't do college, but I audited two classes. And one of my favorite classes was symbolic logic. And I kept all the stuff, my work and all the worksheets from that class. And every time I moved, I dragged it around with me. Did I ever look at it and do anything with it? No, but there was this emotional attachment to it, and I wasn't willing to let it go. It took years of moving it over and over again before I got willing to, Like, okay, I'll get rid of my work, but I'm going to keep the worksheets from the teacher. And then finally, I let go of the worksheets from the teacher and let everything else go. But it took a long time of letting go of other things in my life before I became willing to let that go. So we have our things that we get stuck on. The key is to be gentle with yourself. Don't beat yourself up, and just be willing to start doing the repetitions. Start letting go of stuff that's easy. Make it a habit to purge in your life. I'm constantly decluttering, and I have tons of space. It's just a habit. We are constantly accumulating things in our lives, whether it's digital clutter or physical clutter or emotional clutter. It requires us to constantly evaluate and take a look at things. And so it just becomes an ongoing habit of decluttering. Like, I'm constantly purging files. Oh, time for that to go. Or constantly purging clothes. Like, I just went on a trip, and I went back east, and I thought I was going to need some pants, and I went vegan in December. I went to try on all my pants, and none of them fit. I'm like, oh, I can get rid of them all. And then I went shopping and bought some new pants that fit. But it was so easy to let go of everything because it just doesn't fit, and it's just not going to fit, and I'm not going to go pay to have them fit to me. I'm just going to go buy some new clothes, But it's a constant thing. We don't just declutter once and we're done. It becomes an ongoing practice that we need to have in our lives. And it's
Like
the ongoing practice of bringing your presence to your life and being willing to witness your experience and be present for yourself.
It's kind of like a spring cleaning. You do it, every spring you got to go through and get rid of your stuff or whatever, that type of stuff. But Lorianne mentioned her garage a while ago, so I can speak to the garage because my garage has got a path from the door to the driveway, and there's stuff everywhere. I mean, I've got shelves, and I've got stuff on the wall, but I mean, I've got boxes of stuff just push shoved, and my wife always gives me trouble about, well, you can't find things because you always just sit it down, you're going to put it up later, because I got my hands full, I'm going to the house, I'll come back and you don't ever do it. So
there's that avoidance. I'll do it later. That's the avoidance.
Yeah. So, so I went out the other day. As a matter of fact, it was yesterday. I bought some bins. I thought, okay, I'm going to get some bins. I'm going to start putting this stuff in these bins, and I'm going to mark them, this is this, this is this. So if I'm looking for it, I can go over here and say, oh, here it is, here, So what do you think about that? Is that the proper way to do it?
First, I'll say that's just organized clutter.
Okay.
The second thing I'm going to say is that's putting the cart before the horse. Everybody wants to buy the storage containers first. Well, you really need to do the decluttering process first, because once you become willing to look at what you've accumulated, just your willingness to take a look at it, you're going to reduce it by 30 to 60%. So the containers that you bought aren't going to work anymore because it's going to be way less stuff. And most people don't have any idea what they actually have because it's just been accumulating. Mm-hmm. I mean, I work with clients all the time and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know I had that. And then we have like 6 of this one thing. Like, how did that happen? Mm-hmm. So what you really need to do first is you actually start, and I tell my clients this all the time, like, you don't tackle the whole garage all at once. You don't tackle the pantry or the closet all at once. You start with 1 square foot at a time. You take that space and you sort everything into just super general categories. In your garage, it's probably going to be tools and hardware and auto cleaning stuff and whatever those general categories are. First, you do a general sorting. And once you get everything sorted, you have this nice clean square foot of space. So you have some clear space. If you need to clean it, sweep it, do whatever. So when you put stuff back, it's neat. But the first step is to do the sorting. And once you've sorted everything, then you start with whatever category is easiest for you to make decisions about, or whatever category is smallest, and look at one item at a time. Am I keeping this or am I letting it go? It's that simple. If it's keeping, you just set it down next to the pile. If it's letting it go, you start a donate pile. Then you do that with every item in that pile first. And when you complete that pile, then you move on to the next one. And so you're learning how to finish what you start. That's one good thing. And then you're doing things in small bite-sized chunks, so you also get a sense of accomplishment. And when you sort like this first, if you got interrupted or there was an emergency, you don't have to throw it all back and make it worse than it was before. You just contain each category in a small bag or a box or whatever, and then you come back to it later when you have the time. So you continue making your decisions about everything in each pile, and then once you're done making your decisions, you look and you're like, wow, 30 to 60% of this is gone. Now you can figure out what you want to do with this stuff. If you already have homes for stuff, put that stuff away. And then if it's stuff you're not sure where it goes with and you need to make homes for it, you put it where it can go, where other like items are, with the whole idea of trying to keep like with like. Now, as you're going through the garage, you're going to have a lot of like with like come up, and you're going to have to put things in areas that aren't decluttered yet. And that's okay. You'll get to those spaces later. But you want to do it that way first, rather than buying the containers and then just throwing stuff in all the containers, because you're missing the whole point of letting shit go. And you have to let stuff go. You don't need 10 hammers and you don't need 6 tape measures. You only have 2 hands. So, I mean, one big hammer, one little hammer, and maybe a rubber mallet, but you don't really need a bunch of hammers and a bunch of tape measures.
Well, yeah, see, and I had that issue because when we were remodeling the house, I'd be out on the driveway cutting sheetrock, measure it. I'd go back and hang it. I'd get ready to measure the next piece and no tape measure. So I told my wife, here, go get me 6 of these or 4 or whatever it was. She'd go, why so many? I said, I'm gonna have one here, 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 here. I have to worry about it. Same thing with hammers. So now then, I've got 6 or 8 tape measures. I got 6 or 8 hammers. You know, I don't need those hammers, but at the time, it was easier just go get a new one than it was to try to dig around and find it. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just,
absolutely. Absolutely.
And,
But have you ever heard of a tool belt?
oh yeah, I have one. Yeah.
You just wear your tool belt while you're working.
But
Then it comes with you in the house.
But see, I felt so good yesterday when I was buying those bins. I thought, see, I'm going to start getting organized. I already felt good. Now I don't feel so good.
Well, it's good you made the start and you want to get organized. So honor yourself for that. That's huge. People just don't realize it's putting the cart before their horse. I've actually never had to have a client buy containers. They've always had what they needed. I've had one client want specialized bins to make everything look uniform in her pantry, but she didn't need to buy them. She already had everything. And that was just a personal choice. So in my 7 years of being in business, not one of my clients has needed containers.
Yeah.
So to the letters, though, in all fairness, that was me that he was talking about. I have letters since I was 11 years old. I traveled around the world. I have friends all over the world. And I still have a good time opening up that letter box and going back and reading back on the letters. And sometimes it's scary because you sit there and go, who is that person? You know, but they're stamped and they're enveloped, so they're specific. It's the only clutter I carried with me around the place. Like I said, I went from 2,400 square feet and a big garage, and with like I had 1,000 books. Now I'm down to maybe 50. You know, ones that I read over and over again. And then when I'm done with one, I'll get rid of them. But there are certain things like my grandfather wrote to me, my great aunt wrote to me, that I'm sorry, if you came into my home and said, I'm sorry, that box has to go, I'm gonna hold on to it. You're gonna have to drag me out with it.
Well, here's the good thing. I never force my clients to get rid of anything.
No.
Never, ever, ever. You can't do that to people. And there's organizers that do. And that's why I'm a De-Clutter expert. I teach my clients how to bring their presence to their lives and how to let go little by little. I never force them to do anything. It only causes more harm. You just can't do that. So if you're not ready to let go of your letters, I would never force you to. I would offer suggestions like, I love that I get that you like the feel of the envelopes and the look of the envelopes and the letters, but in today's digital age, you can scan them and digitize them and have them on a flash drive and never have to carry the physical with you again. And you could take photos of them and have a digital version, but you never have to store it or drag it with you again.
True, but it's not the same thing.
Right, no, and I totally get it.
My grandfather wrote to me, he used a pen, he held that paper. So
it's just
the
but
one
it's just
thing.
stuff. But here's the thing, when you die, it's not coming with you.
No, but while I'm alive, I get to read them again.
Honestly, how often do you read them?
They're right here next to me, and I open up the pail probably once a week to pull out one to read.
Well, then if you actually really use them, and that's different. Like most people have that kind of stuff and they don't look at it. They just hang on to it. It's stuffed in a box, it's in the garage, and they only look at it when they're going through stuff or looking for something, but they don't actually go and enjoy it. If it's something you really enjoy, then do it. And I would suggest that if there's something you really enjoy, maybe take some of your favorites and get them framed and put them up on the wall. If it's something that you really treasure and you want to have around you.
Which I do, actually. A card from Roy is up on my wall. I framed it.
Yeah. She did.
Yeah, I mean, if you can memorialize it and actually you're using it, that's different. I mean, it's not stuff that you're not looking at. It's not stuff that you're not enjoying. So that kudos to you that you actually look at them and read them. I mean, how many letters are we talking about?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. There's got to be 1,000 in there. Yeah,
But what is it,
there's a
one
lot.
box or what?
It's a big plastic box so that, you know, because the thing is I've been in areas where luckily it was always in a plastic box because I had like a flood in my basement at one time and they were stored there at one time when I was in my old house. But now they sit next to me. But I always find that it's safer because as long as they're in plastic, you don't have to worry if there's rain, water, or anything. But that is seriously the only thing that I carry with me everywhere. I mean, I've gotten rid of books. I've gotten rid of, my mother is really, she has a really hard time with letting things go. And they're in their 80s right now. She's starting to slowly do it. But then she gives things to us and she says, this means a lot to me. So then you're with it. And then you don't want to let go of it because your mother gave it to you.
Yeah, we take on the guilt of people giving us their clutter. Well, here's the thing. You don't have to keep anything anybody gives you. You don't have to. It's just the story we tell ourselves. You can refuse to take it, or you can take it and let it go and they'll never know that you let it go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you use them, I think that's beautiful. I mean, if you actually refer to them and read them and get enjoyment out of them, that's wonderful. And it's one box. Like I wouldn't even worry about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, paper? Tell me about paper, because I mean, I'm bad about. Oh, I'll do this later. I'll look at this later. I've got a pile here and a pile here, and I just never seem to get around to filing it or throwing it away or reading it or whatever.
Yeah, it's just deferred decisions. It's that avoidance, and it's, you know, it's the same with anything. You actually have to make the time to look at it. And with paper, what I always tell people to do is you don't want to sort out the paper into categories first, like, oh, this is auto insurance, this is home insurance, this is to do with this, or this is my business. You don't want to sort first. You actually want to just get it all into a pile and look at it, keep or go. And you just have a keep pile. And once you get through a stack, say take a stack like this much at a time, don't take more than that. You know, once you've gotten rid of everything that you're not keeping, that you're honestly not going to read or do anything with, even though you keep putting this pressure on yourself to do it, then you have what's left that you're going to keep. Then you sort that out and then you file it from there. But you don't want to do the sorting first. Then you have all these piles of stuff all over the place. And that just gets really overwhelming, trying to keep track of all the piles. And then you have to go through it again to figure out whether you're even going to keep it or not. So you do the keep or go first. Get rid of everything that you're not going to really read, that you're not going to do anything with, that you don't need. And most of us print out a bunch of shit we don't need and we're not going to read.
Guilty.
And then you go from a stack like this to a stack like this, and it's much easier to file. Then you might have to make a couple folders up or whatever, but then you just file away what you've got left, and then you're good to go. And then you just start with the next stack. But with paper is like one of the most emotionally overwhelming and just really tedious, time-consuming parts of the process. So I always tell my clients, like, start with a little bit of paper and then go do something else. Like if you're going to be working for a couple hours on decluttering, don't just sit there and do paper for 2 hours straight, because you will just drive yourself insane. Do a little bit of paper and then go work on something else, and come back and do a little more paper and work on something else. That's the best way to tackle paper.
Because I would have done exactly. I would have sort of, okay, this is mail, this is this. I would have had 40 piles.
Yeah.
That's exactly the way I would have done it. I mean,
yeah.
So it's interesting to know that's not the way to do it.
Right. And it's funny when you actually, when you're doing sorting, when you gather all the paper, say off your desk or off a table, that's what clears the most space, because that's usually what the bulk of what's on your desk is paper. And so when you get it all into one pile, you've created all this space around you now. You have all this clear space, and then you just deal with the pile in front of you.
Yeah. So would you recommend, we'll just use paper as an example. So if you had just a ton of paper, you know, files, whatever, say set aside 1 hour a day, just go in there for just time yourself 1 hour, go in there and just focus on that one thing or whatever. I mean, slowly chip away instead of just saying, this weekend, I'm going to clean the garage out.
Yeah. No way. Don't you, you have to take baby steps. Like no matter how big the space is, when I work with my clients, it's always 1 square foot at a time. 1 square foot at a time, 1 square foot at a time. You always want to either start with a small surface like a nightstand size or a little, side table. You want to start small. You don't ever take on a huge area. The most we do at one time, especially like when you're in a garage, is maybe 3 square feet. You deal with the 3 square foot area, get that space clear, and then move on to the next 3 foot square area. And you basically I always have my clients work, I start with, because a lot of times you walk into a space, the floor is covered and all the surfaces are covered. So the first thing you want to do is actually deal with whatever's on the floor so you can walk in the room comfortably, then deal with what's on the surface, and then start dealing with what's inside the doors and drawers. But do the floor first, then the surfaces, then what's inside the doors and drawers.
Wow. I've learned a lot. Yeah. This whole thing's been about me. What can I say? Everything she touched on is all my problems, all my faults.
Well, thanks to Christian and Forbes, we have met and now we're connected. So
yeah. Did you have anything else, Lori-Ann?
I do not. I just found this fascinating, and I think that, there may come a time that, if my mother just keeps, she's doing a little bit at a time, but after I decluttered, I went into a 600 square foot apartment and I loved it. I'm a little bit bigger now. I moved into one that's now 1100. And yes, you're right. Guess what? You fill in the spaces.
You don't have to. Careful. I actually have empty drawers. I'm in the biggest space of my life. I've been someone who has, besides when I was married, but before I got married, I always rented rooms and I always pretty much rented furnished places so I didn't have to accumulate furniture. I'm in the biggest place I've ever lived in alone, and I have tons of empty doors and drawers. Like, I love clear space.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have to fill it just because it's empty.
No, but it is very clearing. But I did notice my mother, she is trying, but when I was going to say, I became a lot more cognizant of the cluttering in my parents' home after I decluttered. You just become a lot more aware of walking into someone's home and going, oh, wow, you have all this, like all this, like it's not really needed.
Right.
Yeah. But the problem for me is you go out there and you go, oh my God, where do I start? I mean, it's just the overwhelm, and you're kind of like, well, maybe I'll come back next week and do it.
Right. So now you're going to start small. I always recommend, so if you want to tackle your garage, pick one side by the roll-up door. Wherever the roll-up door is, pick one corner and start there and work your way towards the house and around the garage, and then deal with the stuff in the middle. But work your way systematically around, square foot by square foot by square foot, and only block an hour off and don't say I'm going to do an hour every day. Like, if you haven't been doing any, you're not going to do an hour every day. Maybe say I'm going to do an hour once or twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. Start doing that and seeing how that feels. Set your timer. And what I've noticed with a lot of my clients is, even though they set a timer, they wind up going a little bit longer anyway, just because they're in a groove, they're in a roll, and it feels good. But you don't want to do too much more than 2 hours, because then it's also very emotionally draining. You're stirring up a lot of stuff. You're letting go of a lot of things. So there's a lot that's happening energetically and emotionally while you're doing this. So you want to take the time to make the space, but you also want to give yourself a break, reward yourself, do something nice for yourself, do something you love to do, and then, come back to it another time. You don't want to just, in one weekend, I'm going to tackle the garage. Like, that just is so overwhelming. And one of my other things is, the Marie Kondo method is to take everything out and throw it in one big, huge pile. Well, looking at one huge, big pile of stuff is just really overwhelming for me. Like, most people want to take the box or the drawer or whatever and just dump it in a pile in front of you. You don't want to do that. You actually want to grab one item at a time and sort it into a pile. Make categories in front of yourself, sort it out in an orderly fashion, and that helps keep the overwhelm to a minimum. You're going to feel feelings of overwhelm. That's not going to happen, but you learn to walk through them. You learn to breathe through them, and you learn to, once you actually walk through it, and start doing this process, then you start to have the confidence and you feel good about yourself. Like, wow, I really can do this. And oh my God, it was actually kind of fun too. It wasn't even that bad. It wasn't like trying to drag molasses up the hill in the middle of January. I actually enjoyed this, you know? So just in your garage, pick one side to start on. I usually pick on the side that has like the most open space already, not the most densely packed area, and just work your way through 1 square foot at a time. Pick an hour, you know, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, put it in your calendar, make an appointment like you did for this podcast today, schedule it in your calendar, block the time off, and don't let anything get in the way of it. You wouldn't not show up for your podcast, right?
Right.
So same thing with the appointments for yourself. Keep the appointment for yourself, show up, and just start getting consistent about it. Your garage did not get that way overnight. It's not going to happen in a couple sittings or a weekend. So just keep chipping away at it, and you know, soon enough you'll see all this clear space and you'll feel pretty amazed about it. And you might even be able to park a car in there soon.
Well, that would be a concept there. So how can people reach you? You
can find me on my website, decluttering-spaces.com, or you can just reach out to me via email, info@decluttering-spaces.com. And I also, right when you get to my website, you mentioned the word overwhelmed. I have a blueprint, the 7 steps to manage, overwhelm, and organize any space. And it's pretty much the step-by-step process that I've been talking about with you here on the show, just in a blueprint form that you can look at online. If you want to print it out, you can, but that's more clutter. You could just have it on your computer or your phone while you're doing the process and look at the step-by-step right there. So that's how I can be reached.
Cool.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And fun fact is that we also have a podcast coming in with Stephen Sambliss, who is the one who organized that book with Forbes that you're a part of, I'm a part of, and Christian's a part of, and Wendy's a part of. So that's going to be fun.
Oh, how exciting. The 1 habit for entrepreneurial success.
There you go.
We're all going to be #1 bestsellers.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Mel. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Yeah, I really enjoyed figuring out how bad I was. But thank you. We appreciate it. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Likewise.
Okay. Bye.